Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this session of Geometry, Cosmology, Spirituality. Now, it's a very significant day today cosmologically, because as well as being the full moon, which it will be in around about 25 minutes time, it was also, well, earlier on in the early hours of the morning, UK time, it was the inferior conjunction of Mercury. So what this effectively means is that there's a straight line between Sun, Mercury, Earth, and Moon. Now, when there is an inferior conjunction of Mercury, that's in the middle of the period that's known as Mercury retrograde, where Mercury appears to be going backwards in the sky and passes in front of the sun halfway through that backward motion. So we're at the center of that period of cosmic time at the moment. Now, I thought that because I've been talking about various symbolisms around the number 5 and fivefold symmetry, Venus and the rose, I thought I'd actually look directly at the geometry of flowers. We'll just look at a few flowers with their fivefold symmetry, and then we'll draw a geometric plan of a flower known as Venus's looking glass, a fivefold flower, which is an analysis from a book by my geometry teacher, Professor Keith Critchlow. The book is called The Hidden Geometry of Flowers, and it was the last big book that he published. He died in 2020, April 2020, on the full moon, in fact, the Paschal full moon. Right, so let's begin to look. Now, I'll do a very slight recap of some of what we were looking at in the last week or the last session or two. And then we'll draw this simple geometry of a flower. No, I don't really have much to say. This is so beautiful. I can't really say anything that will improve it. This is a wild rose, the dog rose, sometimes known as, and this is really the traditional depiction of a rose. So, for instance, in medieval Christianity, it would be a fivefold rose, and there is very clearly this association of the number 5 with the rose. But you need to see one of these wild roses to see that, because obviously modern breeds of rose have that whole spiral of petals. Now, this association of the rose is a very high symbolism. I think I've mentioned in previous sessions how it has an association with the Garden of Eden, in the sense that the thornless rose grew in Eden. And then with the fall of humanity, that's when thorns began to grow on the rose, or on the rose stem, I suppose you could say. And so this does inevitably suggest that the rose itself is the true image of the soul, or the soul in its true state. Now, I can't remember if I've shown this image before on the right. It's from the Maness Codex. I showed an image of Tannhäuser from this particular manuscript a couple of sessions ago. Now, in this one, you can see this troubadour ascending to, I suppose you could say, a heavenly lady who is about to crown him with roses. Now, you'll notice that she's not looking down towards him, and she, in a sense, could be an image of the true state of his soul, because she's looking upwards. She's looking forever upwards at the one, and she's not looking down at him, but he is having to ascend to her so that he can be crowned with these roses. Now, this seems to be part of that symbolism of the rose that you find in medieval Christianity, very centrally connected to the Virgin Mary as this heavenly female to whom the soul ascends. Now, I mentioned in the last session how we see this in the layout of the rosary beads, which are also the same shape as the planetary glyph of Venus. So this is all part of one interconnected set of symbols, which really relates to, I suppose you could say, light emerging, or light emanating forth from the East. So these are all symbols of the East. And this idea that we have now really in the current time of the wisdom of the East, I'm absolutely sure that its origin actually comes from this, I suppose, medieval Christian mythos, which is currently understood through, I suppose, the idea that the cultures that are further east of Europe are still more in touch with their spiritual traditions. And so you have this idea of moving eastwards for wisdom. Now, of course, it's not just in Christianity that you have this idea of wisdom and light emerging from the east. You find it in so many different traditions. But the way in which it plays such a significant part in certain ideas that you have in the modern West, I'm sure that they originate from what is essentially this medieval Christian mythos concerning the rising of Venus and the rising of the sun and the emergence of light. Now, I've also shown the Lady Chapel, which is at the east end of Wales Cathedral. It's pentagonal and octagonal, three edges of a pentagon, five edges of an octagon. And so in that sense, with this fivefold rose shape at the end of the cathedral and the eastern end of the cathedral, there's also this garland of roses going around the chapel. So it's rather like a set of rosary beads. And you have five of these triangular shapes of windows. So as you can see, one, two, three of them here, and there's two more around on the south side. And they're the shape of a Pythagorean tetractys, which symbolizes 10, 10 in four levels, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. So you have five of these sets of 10, which is, of course, immediately reminiscent of the 5 decades on a set of rosary beads. And this is the very time that the rosary beads are formulating into their current form when this chapel was built in the very early 1300s. Now, the image on the right, you can see the pentagram star and how it interacts with that eastern end of the cathedral. And so again, rather like that image of the troubadour climbing the ladder at the very highest point, the crown of the cathedral, that's where you have this heavenly rose to which the soul desires to ascend. Now, fivefold symmetry is by far the most common radial symmetry that you see in flowers. So having just looked at that pentagram at the east end of the cathedral, here is a beautiful pentagram in a hollyhock flower. Now, the sun is shining through the petals, so it really makes that pentagram show up. It's not usually quite as distinct as that in a hollyhock. But I'm now just going to show a series of fivefold flowers, and I'll just let the flowers speak for themselves because they are so beautiful. Okay, let's draw a flower from um, Keith Critchlow's book, The Hidden Geometry of Flowers. Here I am. Okay, good to see everyone. Thanks for joining me again. I'm going to spotlight. Right, I'll show you what we're going to work from. Now, you may be aware of Keith Critchlow's book, The Hidden Geometry of Flowers. Um, if you're new to my sessions, perhaps I should explain who Keith Critchlow was. He was an absolutely amazing teacher who I had the very great fortune to learn from in at the beginning of the millennium. 2001 to 2003 was when I was studying with Keith. And he's a huge inspiration to so many people. For many years, I've met people who are quite a lot older than me as well, who've been very inspired by him. So he was teaching for a long time, and I managed to catch him sort of just towards the end in the last sort of decade or so of his life, or decade or two of his life. So that was a very wonderful opportunity for me. Now, this was the final book or the final large book that he wrote. there are various organizations who still deal with Keith's research or who sort of promote Keith's research. And there are two organizations, both run by daughters of his. One, an old organization that Keith was involved in called Kairos. And then there's a more recent organization which is called Keith Critchlow Legacy. Now you can look both of them up online to look more at Keith Critchlow's work. Now, what this book consists of, it's just lots and lots of information, really fascinating information about flowers, I suppose the spiritual meaning of flowers, but also the geometric um, or the apparent sort of geometric structures of flowers, the sort of underlying geometries of them. Now, the one that I want us to draw is a fivefold one, as most flowers, the majority of uh, radial symmetry flowers have that fivefold symmetry. Is this one here? Now, he doesn't actually say the name of this flower, but I'm pretty sure it's Venus's looking glass or Venus's mirror. This is one of the names. So it's fascinating, obviously, that it has that name, that association of Venus. And you could say that Venus is looking at an image of herself in this flower, in this fivefoldness. So this is what we'll draw. We'll draw this rather nice geometry here. If you have Keith's book or you're thinking of getting it, it's page 236 to 237 that this particular diagram is on. Right, now we're going to work on a piece of A4. So A4 paper will suffice, and it needs to be blank on both sides, because what we're going to do is divide the circle on one side of the paper and then put pinprick holes through, and then work with those 5 pinprick holes on the other side of the paper. So we need to have it blank on both sides. Right, we'll begin with a 3-inch radius. Now, I've just noticed that the person who laid out Keith's Flowers book is involved in this session. Hello, Anna Maria. I hope you're doing well.
Hello, thank you.
Hello, good to see you. Right, 3 inches, 3-inch radius. Anna Maria is all the way over in Colombia. Another a fellow geometer who learnt from Keith. Now we will go reasonably close to the edge of the page. So I would go into the middle of the page with this first mark, or this point from which we will begin. Right, we need to put in a horizontal line. Having done that with the same radial measurement of the circle, you can mark above and below. Now I'll be using these 2 points. This will no doubt be familiar to a lot of you. And fivefold geometry with me or with others in the past. So this takes us towards the bisector line that we need to have vertical axis. So having used these 2 marks to get that cross and these 2 marks to get that cross, we'll now put in the vertical line, which hopefully, if we're drawing accurately, should pass through the middle of the circle. Now, there's a nice symbolism here. I might have mentioned this before, I can't remember. If we think of this as being the horizon that we're looking at from overhead, we're of course standing here, and wherever we move, the horizon moves with us because we're forever at the center of the world in that sense. Self, big S, capital S, self-centered. That's perhaps a good aspiration rather than small s, self-centered. Now, east here and west here are both defined by happenings that happen actually on the horizon. So where the sun rises and sets, and in this case on the equinoxes. So we have just these points here with this line, whereas north and south could be said to be defined by things that are happening beyond the horizon. So the celestial North Pole, which you could say is above the horizon, that's the point that the stars move around anti-clockwise. If you're in the southern hemisphere, there's a south celestial pole that the stars move around clockwise. And then south up in the sky is where the sun is at pure local midday. Now, if you're in the southern hemisphere, as I think Anna Maria is, you just have to invert that. So that would be the sun at midday in the north, and that would be the south celestial pole. Right, let's now put in these 2 vertical lines. Actually, I've just realized Colombia is equatorial, so of course it would be different altogether. Right, this is what we need next, this measurement. So these lines give us the midpoints between center and circumference, and so therefore it becomes possible to put in these circles that are tangenting. Now we're only going to be dividing into 5. We're not dividing into 10, so we only need to put in one of these V shapes. That's what we need next on the compasses. This is what we need next. So the full length of that V shape. And that's all we need. Right, oh, breaking my lid. These are the 5 points that we're going to use. You need to put pinprick holes through. Right, now you don't need to do what I'm doing here. I'm marking those 5 points so you can see how I'm going to be interacting with them. So these 5 pinprick holes, I've highlighted where they are there, but you don't need to do that because you can probably just see your pinprick holes. But obviously you need to know how I'm interacting with them. So that's why I've highlighted them. Right. So to begin with, we need to get a measurement on our compasses that would be the same as, I suppose, 2 points close to one another. Obviously, as I say, if you've got a pentagonal arrangement of points here, it's essentially the edge of the pentagon. So that we can do this. Now I'm going to do the equivalent thing from all of the points. Now I could happily just finish there and just look at that for ages. What beautiful form that is. Now this, as you can see, is a curvilinear version of a pentagram star. If we put in the rectilinear version of the pentagram star, it interrelates very nicely with what we have here, in the sense that the straight lines of the pentagram naturally go through the intersecting curved lines. So here we have a very Venusian movement that we're doing. And so you have a marriage of the curvilinear and the rectilinear. Right, I'm now going to draw a line from the point, or the sharp point of each one of those pentagram stellations, all the way through to, or through the center of the diagram. Come to think of it, actually, we are going to need to have the center. So turn back to this for a second, and I need to have the center highlighted for this as well, if you didn't have that already. So as you can see, I'm just going through from point through to the corner, the opposing corner of the pentagon. Right, let's now look at this pentagon here, and we've got the mid-edge point. So, if these are the corners, then the mid-edge point is there. Now, we need to use these mid-edge points, all five of them. So there's the other and another, and so on as you go around. And we want to get our radial measurements that we're going to use. Like so. Now we're going to do that from each one of those five mid-edge points. Now Keith also puts these circles at the ends of the petals as well, interestingly. He doesn't give a reason why, so I shall leave that for you to look at yourself. But it does create a very lovely pattern. Keith was sometimes able to see things that not everyone could see. Now, the final thing that Keith puts in at the center for that small sort of miniature geometry that you have at the center of a flower is a circle which is going to go through these intersection points of the circles. Now, we're only human, you know, we may not have made this quite regular. Mine's a little bit irregular, but do as best as you can to go through those points, and don't worry if it's slightly off. You're in good company because flowers never show perfect geometries. They're always slightly off, but one wouldn't complain about the beauty of a flower. Now, the last thing he puts in is a circle that actually tangents those 5 circles. So an even smaller circle. Now, you might need to adjust your compasses or perhaps use a pump compasses, a drop bow compasses. That might be something that will be of use to you. And again, don't worry if it's slightly off. It's so, as I mentioned, it's page 236, 237 in Keith's Flowers book. Do take a look. It's a fantastic book, really lovely book for anyone who's into flowers and geometry, which will go together very well. Now, something, you know, talking of imperfect geometry, something that one of my eagle-eyed students pointed out to me after the last session was I actually got a wrong point on this one that we did last time, this pentagram and octagram overlay. So I thought I'd better point it out. But she pointed it out to me, I didn't notice. When I divided this circle up into 8, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I should have put this here. So if you found that you've got a slightly irregular octagon, which I did, that's why. We all make mistakes. Right, so let me share my screen again and I shall finish off. Now, this course is gradually filling up. It's in Wells about the symbolism of the pentagram. So looking particularly at the pentagram and spiritual protection. But that, again, goes together with some of this symbolism of the heavenly influence of Venus. So that's actually in the city of Wells, and it's over the Michaelmas weekend. It is St. Michael, Archangel Michael, who gives a ring with a pentagram on it to King Solomon in a text known as the Testament of Solomon. So it's a Michaelmas theme. We'll have a labyrinth, we'll have some wood parquetry, as you can see in the image, and we'll end up with a walk up to St. Michael's Woods, which is a piece of woodland owned by Rupert Sheldrake, and he is celebrating the Patronal Festival in the local village of Dinder. Now, the other upcoming course, as I've mentioned on a few occasions, is this one about John Michel's mandalas, John Michel's geometric paintings from his book, How the World is Made According to Sacred Geometry. This one is online, so do join me for it. It'll be from the 4th of October onwards, and I'll be able to give you some more information about that if you were to contact me. And nearer the time, I'll be sending out a link. Recordings will be made of these sessions, and so you'll be able to look at them even if you can't make the times. I mean, do join me if you can. And another reason to join me is that, I mean, in these short sessions that I've been doing for this past year, it's a bit difficult for conversation because it would make the sessions too long, but there'll be more possibility of conversation and talking about some of these profound ideas associated with geometry. So do think of joining me for that one. Now, the next session, if you're in my time zone, is for the sleepless. It'll be at 2:30 in the morning. So I suppose you could say very late on Monday evening, so late that it's actually no longer Monday and it's turned into Tuesday. For those in the US, it's probably quite good timing. So do join me if you can. Everyone will be welcome. And I shall switch my camera on to say goodbye. Thanks for coming, everybody. And it's good to see all of you. Do come to the next session if you can. If you're sleepless or if you don't mind waiting up late, if you're in my time zone, and of course, if you're in the US, it will be easy peasy to join me. So do come along. And I'm not quite sure what we're doing yet. It might be a fivefold planetary diagram, not Venus, something else. But we'll see. It's quite nice. I just sort of decide at the time, oh, what shall I do next? Oh yeah, okay, I'll do that. So do come along, and I hope you have a good couple of weeks. Go easy. Apparently, Mercury retrogrades, the inferior conjunction, and a full moon. It's quite a high time. So do your best to embrace everything that happens, even if it's not so easy, and go with the changes. Okay, everyone, goodbye, and thanks for coming to this session. See you again next time.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
Tom, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.